question is, so when this has become a 103-page bill,
Yes.
would it be these first 3 pages, or 2 really? I mean, they're not going to be in this when we make the bill. Will they?
Yes.
With
I'll
both?
check out the Office of Legislative Counsel. The first 2 pages are part of the statement of purpose, and that is what is included in a bill generally.
I just haven't seen it as bulleted.
It only happens when there are large bills with, some people prefer to do a long winding paragraph. My predecessor thought bullet points would help.
Great. Okay.
And on that point, it is not fully up to date. If you notice at the on page 3, I start to sort of trail off because I didn't add every single thing that we added in the last draft. So like on line 4, I just wrote maps. But when we get to the final draft, I will make sure that it is a full sentence, not just the word maps.
Okay, thank you. What's the committee's pleasure? Do you want to just start from the top on the 10.4? 10.4?
Yes.
Awesome, okay. That makes the most sense.
Start from the beginning.
All right. Start from the very beginning.
All right. So, what we have starting on page 3 is the next iteration. So what I did was based on your decisions on Thursday and Friday, using the side-by-side, I took the language you decided on and added it to this bill. I also added the Sheldon, what is now called the Sheldon Amendment, related to on-the-record review for district commissions, as well as the environmental justice piece from that. So, you have seen all of the language that is in this bill before, but it has come from various places. Now, when we get to the on-the-record review things, we can talk about it, because I was unclear if you had decided that you wanted to have the on-the-record review for district commissions. You still have some choices to make with the structure of the board and the district commissions, but it's all in here to be considered.
Oh, so you left some there. So part of the 103 pages is that some sections are duplicates. That makes me feel better.
Yes, right.
Got it.
So depending on the decisions you make in regard to the structure of the board, yes, the draft will get shorter. But it did contain mostly additions of things that you decided on last week.
Okay.
Okay. So, section 1 adds a new section to the capability and development plan. As we have talked about as recently as last week, the capability and development plan is a collection of 19 findings that were added in 1973 to sort of be the land use goals that Act 250 is striving to achieve. So you're adding a new one here in section 1, so that there are now 20, and it would be greenhouse gas emissions and climate change.
Folks have questions or concerns about this language?
I do.
Okay.
So in the very first thing, I do not know what this means. Climate change poses a serious risk to human health and safety. I have no clue what that means.
Well,
Do you want me to give it a try, or?
oh
I
yeah,
just,
I would say that that means that temperature extremes cause risk of human health. I think flooding, for example, that's related to climate change. So
is that
there's-
in there? I mean, can we put that in there that specifically says, because when it says pose a serious risk, isn't it, it's left open though, you know, could be fireballs coming down.
Yeah.
It should be left open. Suppose as our climate changes, suppose it gets very warm and we have a lot of floods. What if the next summer, all of a sudden, the climate decides to make a big turn and we have lots and lots of ice and freezing?
That's what I'm saying,
And
it doesn't
it could be
just
danger
leave it
either way,
open
so
for
if it's
anything.
left open, it covers everything.
Hey, Chris, just remember, seasons come and go, so, you know.
Okay. Well, I took care of that.
Clarify it for you, sir.
Well, are there other comments on what Chris is saying? I mean, it's a good question, because I don't think it's linear for everyone, what the serious risks might be.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
fine. Yeah. We'll hold that.
yeah. You could either add right there an including clause, or you could add another sentence, if you would like to add specifics.
Okay, I think we'll leave it for now. We're at the way
Yes,
it is. Okay.
Right, and I would just say that this has not changed since the last draft.
Right.
So,
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Why is section 2 changed to number 2 in the capability and development plan after adding number 20? Is
that it's a fair question. I think that there was a decision made as part of the the Commission on Act 250 process about having climate change be one of the focuses of the work of the Commission, and so having the first section be adding climate change to the goals of Act 250 was a stylistic choice. But it is definitely within your discretion to change that.
I just was curious why. 'Cause I always get. Okay, so that's good. Let's keep going. We'll leave it.
Right, so section 2 on page 4 amends another one of the findings to add ecosystem protection to the utilization of natural resources. This language also has not changed since the last draft.
Questions on this?
May I make a recommendation? Should we just go through where we made changes because of time? Or is this the final walkthrough?
That's a good question. I'm missing 2 members. We could do that. Yeah. Go to where we made changes from last week.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's do that. That's a good suggestion. Unless
Let's see the. Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of thinking.
You would benefit from.
I would, but I can also do this on my own time. I'm just thinking.
No, we could do it.
I mean, it's probably. Unless for as far as having the other 2 members be available to do a thorough walkthrough like this too is probably also beneficial for them. So I can go either way. I guess it's not a big issue for me.
and
We can do it, it's fine.
we've gone through these, haven't we? I mean, we went through them because we went through it. It just
Yeah.
not in order.
Just not in order, right?
We've done it all. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I guess I should listen to it.
We can do it.
It's,
Let's do it in order.
yeah,
Start this as our walkthrough.
as we're doing it,
And
yes.
if we
Yeah.
come to a controversial one, we'll come back and take a vote. Yeah, okay, we're gonna keep going.
All right. So on page 5, there are any specific changes on page 5 other than you did, as with the first 2 sections we just mentioned, you opted to keep your new section 6000, which adds the purpose section to Act 250, as well as and references the capability and development plan and the goals of in 4302.
Okay. And actually, did Billy leave? Billy here? Oh, in the corner, sorry, I can't see you. Did you guys have that? Are you ready to share with us sort of that, the things that were not in the joint proposal and maybe why, or?
Yeah, I think I can do that. If I can just find my notes for that. Do you want to do that right this second?
Well, or I guess I was starting to think about, are you going to be here with us, and when we get to those sections,
Yes.
you can answer questions?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. And so as I mentioned before, there will be, depending on the decisions you make in regard to your board, there will be sort of cascading decisions. So like on line 16, we still have reference to the Vermont Environmental Review Board. If you decide to go in a different direction, that will potentially change.
Okay. And I'm thinking the joint proposal didn't have a purpose section.
Correct, but they did in their reference to the study committee, their municipal planning, they reference one of the things they proposed a study, I believe, is whether or not the capability development plan should be in a section like that or in some other fashion. I think if that's the proper characterization.
Is there another section where we provide guidance on the use of the capability development plan, or is this it?
The only other place it might be would be in 6042, and I don't know off the top of my head if we. No, we don't include it. So yeah, so no, that's.
So this is the part that sort of clarifies the use of the capability development plan as legislative intent. Okay.
Okay, so on the bottom of page 5, we start with the definition of development. So these are the jurisdictional triggers. So the very first one is on page 6, and this is a change from the last draft. Construction of improvements for commercial, industrial, or residential at or above the elevation of 2,000 feet. That language has been there before, but you, since the last draft, chose to leave the 2,500 foot exemption, 2,500 foot exemption for farming and forestry. That was referenced, and the critical resource section. So this is just to say that we took out the definition of ridgeline and we went with a straight 2,000 foot elevation threshold.
Simpler.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go.
Next, on line 5, we have the jurisdictional trigger for interstate interchange area. Would you like me to do a walkthrough of the language?
I think that would be helpful.
All right.
What page?
I'm still on page 6, line 5.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep. The construction of improvements for commercial or industrial use within 2,000 feet of a point of access to or exit from the interstate highway system as measured from the midpoint of the interconnecting roadways, unless a regional planning commission has determined, at the request of the municipality where the interchange is located, or any municipality within the 2,000-foot radius, that municipal ordinances or bylaws applicable to properties around the interchange, 1, ensure that planned development patterns will maintain the safety and function of the interchange area for all road users, including non-motorized. For example, by limiting curb cuts and by sharing parking and access points, and parcels will be interconnected to adjoining parcels whenever physically possible. Ensure that development will be undertaken in a way that preserves scenic characteristics both at and beyond the project site. This shall include a determination that site and building design fit the context of the area. 3, ensure that development does not destroy or compromise necessary wildlife habitat or endangered species. On to page 7. 4, ensure that uses allowed in the area will not impose a burden on the financial capacity of a town or the state. 5, ensure that allowed uses be of a type, scale, and design that complement rather than compete with uses that exist in designated downtowns, village centers, growth centers, or other regional growth areas. Principal retail should be discouraged or prohibited in highway interchange areas. 7, which is a typo, ensure that development in this area not establish or contribute to a pattern of strip development. Where strip development already exists, development in this area must be infill that maximizes the characteristics of strip development. Minimizes. Right, I mean, you know, that would be not a great idea to maximize, but minimize.
Another state.
Is there a definition of strip development that's we can't see, or?
Yes, there is. I believe there's a definition of it in Act 250. Maybe.
It appears in section 6001, subsection 36.
I found it. You beat me by a moment. It means linear commercial development along a public highway that includes 3 or more of the following characteristics: broad road frontage, predominance of single-story buildings, limited reliance on shared highway access, lack of connection to any existing settlement except by highway, lack of connection to surrounding land uses except by highway, lack of coordination with surrounding land uses, and limited accessibility for pedestrians. In determining whether a proposed development or subdivision constitutes strip development, the District Commission shall consider the topographic constraints in the area in which the development or subdivision is located.
Yeah, you go back to 5. What is the principal retail? Is that, I'm raised that question because I'm wondering if it means, mini marts or gas stations or something like
Well, that's a good question that I don't know the answer to, because that is not currently defined in Act 250. Although it is apparently a definition that's used in planning, because Mr. Gregory referenced it earlier.
They used it, and I had the same question when he used it. I was wondering, what is principal retail? Well,
that.
planners left in the room. Yeah.
So if we don't define it or refer to another section of Vermont statute, then it's not clear. So should we define it or refer to something? And if we're going to refer to something, should we go over that?
Yes, I think those are your options, yeah.
Okay.
I don't have a definition off
We can
hand.
do it.
But I can look into that for you. Yes.
Good, all right.
Line 11(8) require site design to use space efficiently by siting buildings close together, minimizing paved surfaces, locating parking to the side and rear, and minimizing the use of one-story buildings.
Carol?
Well, they don't include parking underneath, which might be something that people would do. And to the side and rear, so that you can't see it from the highway, or so you can't see it from the front of the building? I'm not sure where it's to the front and the rear. You know, what are you trying to protect? Is what I'm saying. We're not telling
Yes,
them.
I kind of keep wondering about this whole thing, and Billy, I guess, are you listening to this conversation? 'Cause I think it might end up being a question for your team, which is like, if I,
Okay, what section?
talking about just the way you approach the interstate interchanges.
Right.
Or sorry, John, I didn't see you. I was looking right past you, Billy. The approach on this, it feels more prescriptive than it might need to be. I mean, maybe given what Peter Gregory just told us, I don't know, they developed their standards. I guess one question is, how would this incorporate a regional planning commission that's already done a lot of their work around interstate interchanges? And then, somewhat related, well, I struggle with a regional planning commission having the authority to work with the town in their own district. So we talked about having the Natural Resources Board be the decider, because it seems a little circuitous to have them deciding together about a statewide land use planning goal, or not circuitous, but where's the NRB in this? That's a question for either of you.
You want me to take it?
Yeah, that would be great, John.
I wish Kate McCarthy was here as my main comment, because Kate who works for VNRC, as John Groveman for VNRC.
I feel like we did talk with Kate about this, but
Yeah.
we didn't get.
Well, Kate, I think, developed a criteria. I can just tell you what the idea is, and you probably heard this already, but so when you have just a set radius for jurisdictional purposes around the interchange, it works for some interchanges, but for other interchanges, it's too broad, and it captures development that it's not this sort of sprawl strip development that you'd be concerned about, and it sometimes could be so broad of a radius that it actually could go into areas that are basically sort of the center of the municipality or the village, right? And it's mostly resident.
We're not questioning the
Yeah,
idea that
so I just
it's
kind of
a-
want, but I'm just trying to explain how it. So then we said we needed a way to then adjust that, and that's where the criteria came from. I don't know where Kate pulled them from, but she's an expert and a planner, and I'm sure she talked to other planners in developing them. I think that regional planning commissions that are already doing this, then they would be okay with it. The criteria should be consistent. If the RPCs feel there should be some tweaking to the criteria, I mean, obviously, that would be great. If people have constructive comments on how to make the criteria clearer and more in sync with what they're already doing. But I think the idea was if regional commissions are doing it, that it wouldn't be a burden. And then in terms of who reviews it, I really don't remember how that was developed, or if the administration cared about that issue even, like who did the review. I don't really. I think was it Chris and Kate that worked on that.
Currently, it's proposing the ENRB.
No. Currently
It's
is
the
proposing
RPC
that
is.
the RPC review it with their town, which seems like it should be the.
But if
NRB.
you don't, I think it came from Chris and Kate's conversation. But
I
it,
don't know the answer to
yeah.
that.
But I mean, I don't know that. I don't recall it being like a big issue of like who reviews this as being like an important. Do you agree with that?
I agree.
So I think if the committee thinks that there is a better process for reviewing it, I think we're very open,
I prefer that it would be an NRB, whatever form we get to, hopefully we'll get to one that we can all agree to. Carrie?
My only thought on why we would want to keep this language is that if the RPCs are already building their regional plan or approving local plans for communities that have interchanges within their boundaries, they're already doing that work, and I think that could, what we have here might be able to take advantage of that existing relationship between the municipalities and their regional planning commission.
So I'm just gonna email, I just wanna make sure Kate, because I don't really, she developed this and she could explain it, and I'll ask her to look at it and just, she could write you an email, just to give her her perspective.
She did tell us the other day.
Yeah.
Actually, so I should just look at her.
Yeah, I don't know what she said.
Carolyn?
All right, so going back to this exact language here, maybe something like locating parking to consider aesthetics, neighborhood, and view corridors, for example, to the side and rear of buildings, and minimize the use of one-story buildings. And then they get the message, and no one has to wonder. No one has to feel like they have to put something in the rear of a building when that would be backing up in the interstate and somebody really wants to have a cute little different feeling somewhere else.
Could you say that again?
Yeah, it would be locating parking to consider aesthetics, neighborhood, and view corridors. For example, parking located to the side and rear, and minimizing the use of one-story buildings. So they get why we're saying side and rear, so that if it makes sense to have it in what might be the front of a building, that doesn't matter. You know, because the front could be, someone could just pretend the front is, have a fake front door. They could. You know what I'm saying? I think you know what I'm saying.
Okay, let's just
All right.
hold that thought, Carrie.
I'm just coming back to the Regional Planning Commission. I just want to mention one other, perhaps Mr. Groveman could consider this when in your email, but one other value of having the RPC engaged, in addition to what I just said, is that it may help this type of oversight to occur outside the Act 250 process. And there may be some financial benefit in doing that, where a town or a development wouldn't necessarily have to trigger Act 250 if they didn't need to.
Or maybe it's a regional plan that's been approved by the NRB. As they get approved. You know, Regional Planning Commission.
Yeah, I know that municipalities do pay into the regional planning commissions for the services rendered from that regional planning commission. Usually there's a fee associated with that, and towns are members of the regional planning commission. They pay annually. I'm just thinking that this structure might aid municipalities in using an existing relationship, existing infrastructure to address this topic outside the purview of a 50 process. So it might make good fiscal sense to keep it to where it is.
So I would respond that maybe that's possible, and I haven't thought through that angle of it, but this would be introducing a different entity into making what is almost a jurisdictional opinion, which is what it's establishing whether or not Act 250 jurisdiction applies to a project, and that currently resides with the district coordinators. You did contemplate the other day whether or not the district commission should do that, but that is a process that happens already, and so this is establishing another entity to do a similar process.
That was my point, and I would love to, I'm not comfortable doing that. So we have enough questions around how to improve the jurisdictional opinion process without adding another wrinkle.
Just for clarity, so I think the idea was to then, this under the proposal, this jurisdictional trigger wouldn't go into effect until the RPCs or whoever had a chance to adjust the boundary to make sure it was accurate, And then once it was set, there would be pretty clear jurisdiction. It would be like a district. It would be basically a map, and then you'd be in it or you wouldn't be in it. I don't think there'd be complicated jurisdictional opinion issues. I think the complication is in adjusting the area. But once the area is created, it would basically be like a zoning district. It would just, and then you'd either be in it or you'd be out of it. It wouldn't be.
No, because this is allowing people to get out of it in certain quadrants around that district if they've done their planning that meets these goals.
But that would be drawn into the map, though, is what I'm saying. It's not a case by case. That wasn't the intent. The intent was not that it would be like a case by case basis. The intent was that the whole district would be adjusted to include only the areas that were necessary based on the criteria to protect the values of development around interstate interchanges. So that was the intent. Maybe that's not how it reads or how it's being interpreted, but does that make sense? So that was the intent, is to create a district and to determine up front what the boundaries were and what was in and out of the district. So that was the approach. There could be other approaches. Does that make sense? At least what the intent was?
I don't know. Evan?
Evan Meenan from the Natural Resources Board, and I think the intent piece is important, and I think that's why, I'm assuming that's why it says the request has to come from a municipality, because you wouldn't, 2,000 feet is potentially a very large area, and if every person who was opening up a business in that area wanted a separate evaluation for their own individual project about the current status of your municipality's zoning regulations according to these criteria, that could easily result in a lot of duplicative work and review. And that's, I think the idea was that, yes, this would be a one-time determination. Municipality updates its zoning bylaws. Are they still good under this section? So it doesn't happen each time a new business moves into that 2,000-foot radius.
Yeah, I don't think anyone thought that. Sorry, I guess I didn't. Maybe that's why I didn't understand what you were saying, because I was like,
That's why I went back to, so the intent is to create a radius that makes sense, understanding that based on maps, and you can look at the maps, that sometimes a radius is too, it captures more development, I think any reasonable person would say. For that interchange that is is not needed, and you'd be pulling in property that's not going to have a threat on an adverse effect of what you're trying to protect with this criteria, and then so provide an opportunity to adjust that boundary up front before this whole jurisdictional change would go into effect. And there was a time limit on that. I forget what it is, but so that was the approach. That was the philosophy behind what we were trying to do.
where is that in here? Can you show me that language, please? 'Cause that is not what I understand this to be.
I have to go. You can pull up that language. I only really knew what was in the NRC administration proposal. I really wish Kate was here because she really worked on this. So
Well, we have
you
the
know.
NRC, right here, I got my copy.
So I can help if you'd like.
Sure.
Billy Costa, so if you go right to the beginning of that section, sub 11, it says, this is a jurisdictional trigger. It says the construction of improvements within this radius. And then if you go down to line 8, it says unless. So it basically says there's this radius of 2,000 feet that automatically establishes jurisdiction on interstate exchanges unless there's this planning effort that's undertaken, the criteria for which are set forth below. So
Sure. But where's the time, where's, what John was just saying?
in the I believe in the enabling, the kind of at the end where it says when certain provisions of law.
Yeah, it's when it goes into effect, like
Go
the
into
very
effect.
end, the effective date. So there's something. One of those effective dates is that the effective date of the jurisdictional change does not occur right away, and that's because it gives time. That period of time is a time that it would allow for those adjustments to be made. If people don't make the adjustments, then it would default to to the radius that's in the bill. So you're not mandated to do it, but you have the opportunity to do it.
Can you find that, Ellen?
Yeah, on page 86 in their effective dates.
In our bill?
No, it's not in our bill.
In their bill? In the,
Line 6. Yeah. Right, so it's not in the annotated version, it's in the full text version.
any appeal of a decision of a regional planning commission shall be calculated as if the decision were made on November 1st, 2022. What does that mean?
I don't know.
John, what does that mean?
I don't have the context. I've been following on your bill. It's hard for me to just kind of, just go to specific random sections, and I have to think about it. I have to go pull it up and look at what the effective date, but one of those effective dates, and I don't think it's that one, relates to when the jurisdictional trigger goes into effect. I would suggest that the best way to if we could get back to you, and so I could sit down in my office and read it, kind of piece it all together, and then send you an email that says this is how this all fits together and these are the dates, that would be a better way to try to go through this. Because these are very answerable questions in terms of getting you the information, and then there are policy choices that you can make to do that or not do it, but I just, it would be easier if I could just look at the bill.
What else happens on November 1st?
The remainder of the act takes
I
effect.
see that, yeah. All right, I need to understand that more.
Should we move on to the road roll?
Something really easy.
Yeah, I know.
And these numbers are off, right?
Yes,
So
I will fix them in the next draft.
I think I might be able to answer that question. Evan Meenan from the Natural Resources Board. So in the joint proposal, the special treatment of interchange areas appears in section 1 of the bill. That section 1 doesn't take effect until November 1st of 2022, which means that jurisdiction's not actually going to be triggered in any of those interchange areas until that date. But what the effective date / transition portion of the administration bill does is it says before the effective date of that jurisdictional trigger, municipalities, go get your act together and get this determination made ahead of time. But then it gives members of the community the 30 days from the actual effective date of the jurisdictional trigger to appeal that determination. In other words, it gives them the benefit of additional time. So they don't have to keep track of when the municipality actually gets the determination made, if that determination is made in advance of the effective date of that jurisdictional trigger. All the community needs to know is 30 days from November 1st of 2022, I can file an appeal. I have until that deadline.
And so the important thing here is that all of the jurisdictional changes supported in the joint proposal don't take effect until almost 2023.
They're different. They're not all the same.
Yeah, and that was just section 1. I just looked very quickly to see does that section 1 take effect on July 1 of 2020 or November 1st of 2022? because sections 3, 11, and 12 are July 1. We don't have to worry about that though, it's November 1st of 2022. I think it's just trying to give more people more time to appeal these decisions while giving municipalities time to work out this issue in advance of the actual effective date of the jurisdictional trigger.
Okay, so as we go through, we should keep track of the effective dates.
Can I ask a question? So, should that be in a, if you're gonna pursue that, should that be in an action, should we make a section in Act 250 addressing this as opposed to having it in the session law section with the effective dates? Should that be, maybe that's a question for me to tease out if you prefer, yeah, that's,
A lawyer question.
yeah, sorry, okay.
It's okay.
I will contemplate that with your policy decision.
How are people feeling about this interstate interchange? You know, we did this, Carol made a proposal for changing, the wording on one of the.
And I have three other comments. One is, I'm just concerned about, I'm still a little bit stuck on adding residential to this. I'm also, partial to the 3,000 because that's what the Act 250 Commission came up with. They took a long time to figure that out and had different objectives in mind. And then the last thing is, ensure that, on the bottom of page 6, lines 20 and 21, ensure that development does not destroy or compromise necessary wildlife habitat or endangered species. I was wondering if we put wildlife habitat and wildlife corridors or endangered species.
Yeah, I'm only laughing because you're right by the interstate, but, you know.
Corridors are part of
Well-
the habitat.
Oh, all right. That's fine then. That's in a definition somewhere.
Part of habitat is live, travel. It's usually
Okay.
just the concept of.
Right. Well, yes, but you know, there could be some pathway that we don't know about. That would be great for them to use. Never know. Anyway, but I am willing to be completely dissuaded about the 3,000 and the residential. And I know I heard an explanation last week about the residential, which was, well, if you're gonna put in, 10 or more units, it's gonna fall under Act 250 anyway. But maybe it wouldn't within this area. I don't know why I don't know. If you get an exemption, because you.
That's a good question. Are we creating an area of exemption from regular Act 250 jurisdiction with this proposal here? Are we creating like a downtown that has no?
How are we not? Sorry,
How
now
are we not?
starting to get very confused.
That's not the intent.
Yeah.
The intent is to have additional jurisdiction. If you have a project, if it's a 1 acre town and you have a project on 1 acre as commercial, you would trigger Act 250. These are for projects that wouldn't otherwise trigger Act 250.
right.
That
Okay.
would be within these districts that would be created.
Okay. Alright, so then I'm back to why not add residential and why not have it be 3,000 feet like the Act 250 Commission said, the way they said. And I also have potential language here that I could hand over.
Thoughts on what Carol's talking about? Anyone? Anything? Carrie?
I appreciate your thinking and interest, obviously enhancing this. One of the things I struggle with, especially when we just heard about environmental justice, is the recognition that land values and the cost of land often is an inhibitor to, or is the reason for why land is available for people with limited means. I think it's why it's important for us to be thinking about environmental justice in the context of Act 250. but I'm hesitant in including residential here. For the very same reason Carol's interested in including it here. I think we're both want to be sensitive to the availability of lands, and making sure that we're providing healthy and safe environments for all people. But I also recognize there's some lands that are inherently by their location less expensive than other areas. And so for that reason, I'm less inclined to limit housing, and knowing that we have a housing needs, I'm less inclined to put more restrictions on where housing could occur, with a caveat of wanting safe places for people to live and thrive. So we're coming at this for the same reasons, but different perspectives.
Yes. I am very concerned about the environmental equity, and I'm imagining a project of housing going in, or development of housing going in, which has no way to walk necessarily to the downtown where the shopping is. So now you have to have a car to get there. I'm just thinking of, again, we're thinking of opposite sides of it, but I'm concerned about the same issues. And so I want to know that if someone's going to do residential there, how will the people get from the residential at the highway exit to the town?
Right, and so if they've got good local zoning, they will address that, and if it triggers Act 250, it will address that. And I think stepping back, like, what is the purpose of this? Why are we doing this? I mean, I don't think it's to try to control everything that happens. I mean, if it's a rural area and someone puts a house in, I can't. We're not, Act 250 doesn't take jurisdiction over single houses. We.
I didn't
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought
I'm
you
just
were-
stretching my arm.
And I may just follow up on your comment on the fundamental purpose is to avoid the creation of a commercial area that's going to pull people away from that historic settlement. That's where you get, I think, the intent. So the focus of this, the purpose of this was really to look at commercial. So I guess.
Excuse me, I was thinking your language on, the other focus is scenic. I mean, that's one of the reasons we're concerned. And so, where's that addressed here? I think it is.
You mean the locating parking part? Yeah, it's
Aesthetics.
aesthetics and scenic thing is in here somewhere.
Yeah, line 17, under step 2, on page 6. Although that isn't addressing the parking, but ensure development will be undertaken in a way that preserves scenic characteristics both at and beyond the project site.
Fitting the context of the area, I think, is excellent. Yeah, it's a rural area. Might not want.
Okay. Your language suggestion is for the one that had parking.
Yeah, the parking, yeah, it's, for example, locating parking to consider aesthetics, neighborhood, and view corridors. For example, parking to the sides or rear, to let them know what we're thinking more clearly. It's a repetition possibly of the aesthetics, neighborhood,
That's on
and view
page
corridors.
7, on line 11.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
But I don't mind repeating. But that might not be a good idea. Because then you could say, someone could argue, well, you didn't put it in all of them and you didn't mean it in all of them. And you already had it in number, on page 6 in I, or 1. Sorry, in 2. See what I'm saying?
Right.
legally what's clear or what most preserves what this whole thing so it hangs together. Against challenge, or for people not to be confused or have to go through a whole lot of litigating to have case law to tell them exactly what we really mean.
I don't have a prepared answer for that. So this is setting out the criteria for what a regional planning commission has to look at
Right.
if it's addressed in the bylaws. So you're adding specifics will require that in order that the regional planning commission will look at if the bylaws address the specific thing you're talking about. And so if you want to add clarifying language, you can.
It's okay. I do, but maybe nobody else does. I just worry, but it says side and rear. There's a reason for saying side and rear, and maybe the front makes the most sense because there's a big berm that's up or something. You know what I'm saying? Is this making any sense?
So you're saying that the side and rear shouldn't be a locked in. It should be an including. It should be an example, not a hard.
Perhaps
You
an
shall-
example. Not because I can imagine a building where the way the topography is, the parking would be best in the front of the building. You wouldn't see it as much because of the way, the way it works out. Or maybe
Under, garage.
under, so we don't
What is your
know.
proposed language? It would be good if it was got it.
Locating parking to consider aesthetics, neighborhood, and view corridors. For example, parking to the sides or rear, or even underneath. I mean, we could write or underneath.
Why even talk about side and rear then?
Okay, that's
Sure,
good.
yeah.
I'm just thinking like if this bill is
Chris,
quite
it's
complicated.
Fine.
The simpler we could make it, the better.
Okay.
Okay. Why don't you hand that to Ellen? We can try that out for next time. Which, wow. Okay. Let's move on.
So are we all done with the 3,000 versus 2,000? I don't feel, if you all want to vote against me, that's fine. I just wanted to say I really would like 3,000.
I want to vote against it. I think we should 2,000.
Okay.
I thought we had discussed the other day, we thought
Yeah.
3 was rather
Well, I
exceptional.
know, yeah, I thought we were putting it off because I wrote it down. I could still say something. Okay.
I think that we went with the joint.
Edit her draft.
Carol,
we're
we're
done with
crossing
this.
this off. We're done with that. We will not talk about it again. Okay, fine.
Okay. Next.
Do you have something to do it for?
Don't blame me if it turns out to be a disaster. Okay.
Page 7, line 17 begins the road rule, jurisdictional threshold. So, on, I think it was Friday, you decided to change your language to the joint proposals language, which I made some minor modifications to. So, starting on line 17, the construction of a road or roads and any associated driveways to provide access to or within a tract of land of more than 1 acre owned or controlled by a person. For purposes of determining jurisdiction under this subdivision, any parcel of land that will be provided access by the road and associated driveways is land involved in the construction of the road. Top of page 8. Jurisdiction under this subdivision shall not apply unless the length of road and any associated driveways in combination is greater than 2,000 feet. As used in this subdivision, roads shall include any new road or improvement to a Class 4 road by a private person for the purpose of accessing a development or subdivision, including roads that will be transferred to or maintained by a municipality after their construction or improvement. For purposes of determining the length of any road and associated driveways, the length of all of the roads and driveways within the tract of land constructed within any continuous period of 10 years commencing after July 1, 2020 shall be included. This subdivision shall not apply to a state or municipal road or a road used exclusively for agricultural or forestry purposes.
Okay. So how does, or does this address, like logging roads that then get converted for development?
So the threshold is construction of a road. So a road that's used exclusively for logging and then converted into a non-logging, that's what you're asking?
A road to access a new development.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because if you can do that, you can just get out of this road bill. You can put in a road for logging and then a year later say, oh, that was a logging road that already existed. Right?
They're gonna get around
I think, yeah.
Brian?
Yeah, Brian Shupe with the NRC. You know, historically, that had been an issue, and when it was converted to a development road, it triggered Act 250 historically, and I think the intent would be that that would continue to apply. It is challenging that logging roads sometimes become development roads and skidder trails become driveways, and that had been something that the old road rule was a problem with it, but it did trigger Act 250 when the conversion happened and the development occurred.
Okay, so we could add clarifying language that former logging road converted for development needs to come under this.
I think the point was to exempt agricultural and logging roads, but not their conversion. So,
Right,
yeah.
yeah.
And you think this does that?
I don't have it in front of me. I think it may not.
I live on a class 3 road with a dead end, and then the road continues, but it's class 4 from there. And what has happened with the industrial sugaring operation going on above me, that road is now seen really very extensive improvements, and also you have more people, because the road is being improved to accommodate the sugaring operation. You see more places now being opened up for housing to develop. And so, you know, I don't know if that means that all of a sudden I'm going to be taken in after 3,000 feet of executive. Am I going to be part of Act 250 as a result of that? Or?
Not yet, we're working on it.
I know. I'm afraid of what it means. I got a few more years left, so I want to know.
Yeah.
I mean, I find it very, it's very comprehensive. It talks about a cumulative effect, which is 3,000 feet, is it not? I mean, it's just, a lot of these places are going up, they're back in the woods so that there's a long driveway, you know, and some of them are old skidder roads and are being improved.
You're talking about housing.
Yeah, yeah. Seasonal homes, secondary homes, yeah.
That's what we're trying to get to.
Yeah. Well,
And your concern is, sure, Act 250 can apply to the new homes if that, with the once the road starts to be used to access homes, it is a conversion. Act 250 should apply.
Yours would not, because
But
you're on
yours
a class 3.
is pre-existing.
Well, I'm on a class 3 road.
yes.
So
I'm just trying to
Act
make sure that
250
that's where the
wouldn't
line
apply.
is.
Yeah.
Or what? Yeah, you don't want it to apply if you're already, if the road came.
But I also know that's happening to, you know, other places that, you know, are you know, where as these roads are being opened up now for more and more, either logging or sugaring, there's just, they attract more and more people to come into them.
Well, at any rate, yeah, Carrie.
Yeah, I think last time we talked about that too, and what we thought was, well, we had heard that the intent of this was to apply to the connection with the sale of land. So that
It's not in this one.
it's not here,
Yeah.
but that was the intent, we talked about that last time.
No, I
that-
think we wanted to take that out.
which didn't exist in the last time, didn't at all, but we talked about, that when the class 4 road by a private person for the purpose of accessing a development or subdivision, that's where we wanted to say something on the order of connecting to the sale of land. Trying to get at if there's an existing.
I recall how contentious it used to be when a road rule was in effect. I mean, it just seemed to be something that was always coming up, and it was very, very contentious, and I think that's why it was changed, but I don't know whether we're going back to it or well, this kind of improves the situation as existed, say, 10 years ago.
Carol?
Thinking in this really big picture, oh God, it just left my head. What we're trying to do is preserve forest blocks and to stop roads from snaking into forest blocks, turning forest blocks into woods. And woods are not the same as forests, and we need to keep our forests. This is what we've been learning for 3 years. I've been learning. So, if that's what we're trying to get to, how do we do that here?
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And all I want is Ellen to try on some language that clarifies that a logging road or agricultural road that gets converted for residential purposes falls under this jurisdiction.
As soon as it starts to be used for something, that's the conversion, correct?
For development.
Of any size. Yeah.
It has to be 2,000 feet, but yes. Road has to be 2,000 feet. That's this trigger.
Well, how about on line 10, it says, this subdivision shall not apply to a state or municipal road or a road used exclusively for agriculture, forest purposes. So they would get a pass.
They get a pass until they want to build a house.
Till they want to build a house.
Yeah. And so, looking back for that language would be helpful.
Just a quick question. It used to be originally 800 feet.
It did.
Why is there a change to
Well, and we had,
almost 3 times?
yeah, we had 12. It's interesting that people feel like, I've heard people in this room today say 2,000 feet is this huge amount of distance, and now when it's a road rule, it's
Even with
not.
combined with other
Brian.
rules, etc.
Oh.
The problem before was it was 800 feet applied to a single road, and what we saw were developers building 2 790-foot roads and avoiding it, and it didn't apply to driveways. So, and driveways can be 2,000 feet by themselves and get you to the top of a mountain or in the middle of bear habitat. So the idea was to make it cumulative, but recognize that multiple driveways will add up more quickly, and that's where the 2,000 came from.
Which may, Matt.
So that example of cumulative driveways. You buy a piece of land, build a house. There's an easement, goes to the next one, right? Land, house, easement goes to the next block, and you keep working your way down until you get to 2,000. It's only the development on the very end part of Act 250, or that whole previous 3 or 4 blocks that were.
If you're extending the road, and it would trigger it when you hit the 2,000 point under this.
But only that last piece, or every single piece before that too?
That's a good question.
So like, could you I don't know the consequence of having a retroactive Act 250 on the first piece of the house. When it's already built, what do you do? And I don't know the consequences of either of those, but it's just something I'm
Billy
thinking of.
has something to add.
I think I do. Billy Costa, A&R. So, to try to get at that, what the language says, it has a 10-year look back. So it basically looks for a period of 10 years cumulatively. So if over a 10-year period you trip over that 2,000 feet, then you trigger it for that next house. So if you were to do like 1,000 feet each year over time, if it was within a 10-year period, it would trigger
Once you hit
the 2,000.
2,000 threshold, then that building is now triggering 250 to.
And all subsequent.
Right, and if you keep on going, and that's what's getting at the forest block. That's the point of maintaining the. Okay.
So a quarter of an acre is 1,320. I mean, a quarter of a mile is 1,320 feet. Devin.
I just wanted to remind that the sort of general framework for this is not completely foreign to Act 250. The same kind of thing works with subdivisions when it talks about the creation of so many lots within so many years. And really what it tells people is if you're going to be developing a subdivision, whether it has sufficient number of residential units or a sufficiently long road, you should be planning for that and expect it so you don't get those unfair surprises. So if someone takes their time and they're developing, 11 houses and they didn't realize that they were going to trigger Act 250 jurisdiction, yes, that's poor planning on their part, but the first 9 houses will be reviewed once jurisdiction is triggered. So
But they're already built.
But they're already there, yeah.
that creates problems for people sometimes. That's why they need to plan up front. If they know they're going to do a subdivision that involves 11 units, they either need to get a permit or they need to space them out sufficiently so that they don't end up triggering Act 250 jurisdiction. So the same thing with a road. If someone knows they're going to be they're going to have a huge tract of land and they're going to be developing it over the years, they need to either make sure that they construct their 2,001 foot road over 11 years, or if they're going to do it in 10 years, they get an Act 250 permit. And plan for it and make sure that the impacts that this is designed to mitigate are not realized by slowly building 1 house and then 2 houses and 3 houses and ratcheting all of those impacts and then saying you actually only get to review the last foot of my road.
Right. Well, what if it's not necessarily a planned thing and it kind of just develops itself organically? Like I think of that, I had, so where I grew up, right, back in the 80s, the road just ended. And later on, people had just kind of just bought a plot and built their own house on it. It wasn't a developer, they just did it themselves. And eventually that road connected, and it's got its way over 2,000 feet. But my point is, what if it just kind of happens organically? It's not like a developer doing it, it's just people buying a piece of land. And
Well, I think what the committee has heard a lot of testimony about is that planning is really important and planning is huge. And so while there might not be anything malicious in that type of organic development, it's not probably very well-planned development.
no, it's not at all.
And this is supposed to try and encourage well-planned development. I mean, there's the saying, an ounce of preparation is worth a pound of perspiration. If you plan your project up front, your life is likely going to be a lot easier than if you're dealing with NRB enforcement because you didn't plan the first 2,000 feet of your road.
Right.
And you were cutting through, wetlands into your wintering area and important connecting habitat and important forest blocks.
Okay, thoughts on 2,000? Do we like where we're headed with this language?
Say again.
No one can hear you. Trevor,
I'm sorry?
can you speak up?
Oh, I said it, I'm okay with the 2,000 feet.
Okay, others feel like, I guess I'm assuming no news is.
The one thing I have a question about is who's liable? When a developer does the houses and then suddenly these people have got their houses and now the last house goes in, now the whole thing's subject to Act 250. Do the houses before it or anyone who's failed to plan, do you have a cause of action against them?
So enforcement wouldn't be any different than in any other context, and Act 250 jurisdiction applies to the land, but it could also apply to the perpetrator. So if you, for example, should have gotten an Act 250 permit, we would go after the landowner. It's possible that we would go after the current landowner, the former landowner. It could also be their contractors. If they're contractors, for example, there's plenty of times where someone has an Act 250 permit, a condition is violated, and we would go after the landowner and their contractor and let them sort out their respective liability amongst themselves, as long as it gets fixed.
All right, we ready to move on?
Yeah. Does moving on mean no change to this language, or would it mean thinking about the two things that were raised that I felt weren't quite addressed. One was what to do about forest roads that get converted to development.
Oh, I feel like I asked Ellen to make language
Oh, okay.
changes.
Right. I have a question, and if this is too in the weeds, I can ask it offline, but I guess I'm wondering if the first line on line 17, the construction of a road, if we changed it to the construction of improvements of a road, because I guess I'm wondering, is a logging road paved? Or,
Yeah, but most of these roads wouldn't be paved either, these rural roads. Yep, even for development access. I mean, there's logging
Okay.
roads in my area that are, I mean, 18-wheelers go cruising on, I mean, they're huge.
Okay.
But they're not paid.
They're basically built to federal standards. They look like subdivisions going in.
okay,
So you wouldn't have to improve it at all. I don't know if that's the
Okay.
route to take. I
okay,
hear
okay.
you.
No, that's,
So that was one of my questions.
Trevor.
I have two.
I would just also submit that if someone was planning to do something like that and it was in fact in ag use or logging, they could sort of fix it up while they were logging and get around that issue.
Sounds like there's work in there's language in the previous road rule that addresses it. Or, is that true, Brian? That's what you.
I think it addressed the conversion issue. That seems to be a pretty simple fix.
My second question, I have two. The second one was the point I made about relating it to a sale of land, whether you say accessing a new development or development of subdivision relative to a sale of land. This is,
Well, that one for me, I mean, I guess that if the purpose of this is to try to address forest fragmentation, I don't know why we would add that.
well, what comes to mind is in my district, I know of one structure, abode that's at a degraded class 4 road, and I know that the landowners has an interest of upgrading that road at some point, to be able to get a field truck up to service their abode. And so that's the question, whether that would trigger, if they already have, I don't know how we define development, but they already have a structure that they live in.
If they already have a structure, they already have a road.
Well, it's a class 4 road, but they'll need to make improvements to the class 4 road to be able to make improvements to their development, to their home, or it's a yurt, actually. That's why I call it abode. So I'm just trying to think how this would apply. And we had talked last time about it, and it was confirmed that the intent of this was about the effort to subdivide for development or and upgrading class road for that new development. But I don't know how to capture that in what language we would want to make sure that we capture that intent.
Trevor.
Terry, to your situation, I mean, the person's got a house on a road that exists, and they want to improve that road. I'm not sure where this applies, because you're not extending the road.
It's not a change of use either, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not sure where
Okay.
they would, any jurisdiction there,
Okay.
in my opinion. You might want to ask the town.
Yeah, okay, thank you. It's just that we use the term development, so I didn't know if that's defined to include an existing use of that parcel. I don't know.
Can I ask Gavin if he has an opinion on that interpretation?
I don't know that I do. I mean, it sounds like, is it just routine road maintenance that you're talking about? That's why I'm not really sure what the problem that you're describing is. If someone has a house and it's served by a road/driveway and they somehow they're know they need to do some work on it that doesn't involve an extension to serve another newly created residence or lot. That kind of just sounds like the type of road maintenance we all do.
Okay, okay, thank you. Just wanting clarity there. So.
Okay, let's see if we can get to page 10 before we adjourn.
Page 8, line 13, development does not include construction of improvements for logging, farming, logging, or forestry below 2,500 feet. I left this in because this is a change from the last version. We had adjusted it to 2,000 feet, and based on our conversation, we are in keeping intact the exemption up to 2,500 feet. Next is the definition of floodway, which is amended at the top of line 9 to be flood hazard area, and that has the same meaning as under 752. That's not a change, that's similar, or that's the same from the last draft. So is definition 7, river corridor.
Those are just terms that we now use as opposed to floodplain or whatever.
Yep, yep. To reflect the changes that A&R has added in the last.
Remind us, and you just probably said it, and I'm really tired. 752 is.
It's in the water. It does it. That's where that's the definition section in Title 10 where flood hazard area and river corridor are defined. That's the part of the chapter over that.
Conservation.
Yeah.
10 years later.
So subdivision is on line 13. This is a slight change from the last draft. Subdivision means each of the following: a tract or tracts of land owned or controlled by a person located outside of a designated downtown or neighborhood development area. So I changed this definition because in the previous definition we had made reference to the enhanced designated areas. So to reflect that you are now confining it to designated downtowns and neighborhood development areas.
Okay.
Page 10, there are no changes. Page 11.
For the record, we're after page 10.
Only because it was
Easy.
We do best with these pages. Could you put more of them in here, Ellen?
Sure. More pages to your
More,
100
no,
page
more
book?
pages with no changes, except for that's and whiches.
Okay. So the definitions haven't changed until we get to page 13. These are all definitions that have been previously in your bill: connecting habitat, forest block, fragmentation, habitat, recreational trail, air contaminant. Oh, commercial purpose. We had the discussion the other day about commercial purpose. Do you want to? It hasn't changed since the last draft, but we did have a discussion about it last week.
No, nope.
And this gets to Carol's comment earlier, page 12, line 4. Particular species of plant or wildlife lives and travel. You could say and travels or something if you wanted to. Or uses.
That was
Or
actually
uses.
when we got here. I mean, we have connecting habitat definition.
You could say or occupies, and so that includes travel corridors.
Mr. Weiss.
Thomas Weiss, somewhere up above that in the text, you changed to which or to that, and it was necessary wildlife habitat was the definition. I think it was like 12 or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. Okay. Are you saying we shouldn't have?
Well, it just includes breeding and migratory periods.
9, 10, and 11.
Yes, mine's 9, 10, and 11. So that concept of connecting habitat seems to be in there without calling it connecting habitat. But I just wanted to point out that you have that definition as well.
Carol?
All right, so I guess on, for what Carrie was just saying, on page 12, line 4, and travel, but I'm thinking about how with global warming, we're gonna have species migrations up through Vermont, and we've gotta let them get through Vermont if they wanna go through it and keep going north, so lives and travels might be nice, because it might be traveling.
Yeah, or occupy, you could use the term occupy too.
So
I would use the word occupies as opposed to lives.
Yeah, cause and that includes all use, you know, whether they're residing, nesting, or traveling. They're found there, so it's
They might-
occupied.
Yeah, but I was just thinking, if you say occupies because they're found there, they may not be found there, they may just be there temporarily for a few years.
That's still how.
You're okay with that?
That's still how.
Okay, if you all are fine with it, it's all right.
So lives, gone, and occupies.
I'm wondering are there any unforeseen ramifications of that change? I feel like we spent a lot of time on some of these definitions, and I was,
Maybe it'd be just temporary tenants and
I mean, we have connecting habitat for a reason, and that is, I think, to identify places that animals move through. I don't know. So the proposal is occupy?
Yes.
I'm okay with lives, I'm okay with whatever, I just don't want,
You just what?
I don't want it to be, I just wanna be sure we encompass enough.
Yeah.
But don't put parking.
I'm thinking of you, Karen.
Or
Raise
else
this
it's
issue
dwelling.
because of your change.
Okay, well, all right, I'm okay with occupies, if you're okay, are you legally okay with occupies, not policy-wise? But legally, are you comfortable with the word occupies?
I don't mind getting Fish and Wildlife to weigh in.
Okay, we're,
Think about dwells.
I know,
yeah.
well, it doesn't necessarily.
What's the
Well,
purpose of this change?
The use of the definition of habitat. It's used in your definitions. It's used in multiple places, primarily in Criterion 8. So you use it as part of necessary wildlife habitat, which is also defined, but it's also used as part of connecting habitat. So it establishes the definition. So if you are concerned, you were concerned about the time period associated with lives?
We just flagged it to make sure
Yeah.
it meets Carol's thinking, which is an important one. That habitat should also include its function for travel, for movement,
Yeah, for
for
movement.
species movement.
Hers was relative to climate change, things
Yeah.
moving,
Lives and
going
moves.
through.
You could just say lives and moves.
Occupy for a while, move on.
Lives, occupies, dwells.
Try that, lives and moves.
Hold on, claim it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Lives in for movement, how about that, lives in for
How about
movement.
utilize? Utilizes.
habitat
That
means
covers it.
physical and biological environment in which a particular species of plant or wildlife lives. To me, that term is not specific to a point in time. Okay? It's not yesterday, it's not 10 years ago, it's today. And if climate change is creating changes and things are different in 10 years, it still applies.
Okay,
So I don't think we need to change.
thank you for bringing it up.
We're gonna keep lives in here.
Yeah, it sounds,
I like dwells better. Dwells.
Occupies or utilize.
Well, we're done.
Good.
Okay.
So we have greenhouse gas. Then on to page 13.
I have a
Sure.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm still on commercial purpose.
Okay.
I don't really, I'm not happy with contribution or donation. I don't know why that could constitute a commercial purpose. Because it means you don't necessarily have to pay for it, if it's a contribution or a donation. I'm using it and I don't have the $5 or whatever. I'm not prohibited from using it. It's not the price of admission. If I wanna contribute something so they can give up that cross-country trail, for instance, okay, fine. I don't have the $5. And I'm afraid it's just to me, it's, it limits someone's good intentions, I guess, in terms of not trying to make a buck out of this. But if you wanna contribute to help and control it, especially in trails, I'm really finding out how trails work here. Both cross-country trails, or bike trails, or hiking trails. If there's no admission, set fee, then I don't believe it should be commercial.
I think one of the issues is that, a couple things come to mind. This is until a recent court case, the way that Act 250 has worked for a long time, maybe since the beginning. And people are using this to get out of regulation, and it has caused conflicts in certain areas. I think I'm thinking of shooting ranges in particular.
Yeah, that was Evan Meenan again from the Natural Resources Board. The Supreme Court case was the LaBerge case, and that's exactly what it was. It was a shooting range case where they had accepted over the years, I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of tens of thousands of dollars in donations, opened up the property to use by members of the public. And what the court held was that unless the board was able to prove that the business, basically that the donations were necessary to the survival of the business, then Act 250 jurisdiction was not triggered. That creates a very difficult thing to prove for the Natural Resources Board, because we don't have all of the same investigatory tools that, say, like criminal law enforcement does. It's difficult to go, well, how are we going to get a hold of this business's books and financial records in order to prove something like that? It's not impossible, but it's very time intensive and difficult. And there's another shooting range that we're dealing with right now that is very aware of that issue. And we have not been able to take any action because we can't prove either a direct fee for service or that the donations that the business receives are actually essential for its operation, and the impacts at this place are significant. We've received maybe 15, 20 complaints about them, and there's nothing we can do about it as of right now.
What are these shooting ranges operating under? A municipal permit or?
Actually, there's currently a pending court case regarding this exact shooting range and the municipality that's trying to regulate it. But they've built classrooms, roadways, culverts, berms, a 2-story structure for running obstacles. They've got they have a permit with ATF right now to try and get explosives, to do breach exercises, all kinds of stuff.
And they run on donations. Yeah, I think that's why this is, it needs to be clear. All right.
But perhaps with the information we're going to receive about trails, that might help address some of the concerns you have.
Greenhouse gas. Did we do that one already? People good with this? Where are we? 13? I guess the next definition.
Yep, the bottom of page 12, greenhouse gas, it hasn't changed since the prior iteration. Neither has technical determination, but this draft does now include definitions for forest-based enterprise and forest product. Those definitions are used in relation to the new language you added regarding permit conditions and for forest-based enterprises.
Can you remind me where we use technical determination?
Sure. In the permit presumption area, A&R technical determinations are given are given deference. Let me make sure I'm going to say this correctly.
We can.
Yeah, it's used in the permit presumption section.
We'll look for it there.
Sure.
Okay, so we've added forest-based enterprise. So we should read this one then.
Okay. Forest-based enterprise means an enterprise that aggregates forest products from forestry operations and adds value through processing or marketing in the forest products supply chain or directly to consumers through retail sales. Forest-based enterprise includes sawmills, veneer mills, pulp mills, pellet mills, producers of firewood, wood chips, mulch, and fuel wood, and log and pulp concentration yards. Forest-based enterprise does not include facilities that purchase, market, and resell finished goods, such as wood furniture, wood pellets, milled lumber, without first receiving forest products from forestry operations.
Yeah.
Okay, then Dylan.
So something along the lines of an Ethan Allen furniture factory would not be considered a forest-based enterprise.
Do they receive?
They have a raw mill, so they receive log length wood, and then they cut it down, and it goes through there and do a processing mill. Initially in Beecher Falls, and then I think it's somewhat shipped to Orleans as well.
They get raw logs.
Yes,
Then they would be a forest-based
Yeah.
enterprise.
Yes,
They would be.
they would be.
Yeah.
Which this is an interesting example. But they wholesale ship it out.
Yeah, I don't know if they have a showroom anymore or not.
Oh.
I don't believe they do. But I think it's all shipped out. I haven't been to the Beecher Falls. They have
If
a raw
it's
wood
wholesale,
I don't think they have retail, at least not the one I knew of.
okay.
The Ethan Allen I knew of wasn't the one. There may be one. Do they do retail, the one you're thinking of?
No.
So then it would be one of these, right?
Another one comes to mind is Indian Head, which does plywood, veneer plywood. Up in my neck of the woods.
Include sawmills, veneer mills, pulp mills.
Veneer mills,
That's what
fine,
this
yeah,
is.
that would do it.
Okay.
Carrie.
I'm circling the word retail, wondering whether we could just through sales, because I'm thinking if we have a business that sells quantities to a retailer, that would make them wholesalers. So I just wanted to not inhibit the sawmill, for example, to be shipping their value-added product, whether it be a board or a clapboard, if they're delivering it to a lumber yard that's selling it to, or a facility that's selling it as a retail. So would there be any repercussion or consequence if we drop the term retail, just through sales on line 9?
I don't know why you do that. Billy.
Just to clarify, the language that precedes that, that says aggregates and adds value through the processing or marketing in the forest product
I see.
supply chain. So if they're a wholesaler, they're in that supply
Okay,
chain.
thank you.
So if you were making cedar shakes, you were getting, you're bringing in the cedar, you're cutting it, sawing it, and then making shakes out of that, and selling it to whoever knows you'll get cedar shakes for sale. Would that be considered a forest-based enterprise?
Yes.
I think the operative term is or. There's a number of ors there. That helped. Thank you for pointing that out.
people good with that one?
Yep, all right. Make it all the way up to page,
Alright, so this new section at the bottom of page 13. Oh, do you want to go over forest product? Is that what you're
Yeah,
doing?
veneer wood is different from clapboard, so, which is different from logs. So, can we think of a term that can include just plywood or wood, or I have a clapboard sawmill in my district. I wanna make sure that forest product also includes their product, their forest product, which happens to be, in this case, boards, board feet of wood.
Clapboards,
Yeah. In that case, it's clapboard. I have another one who makes building boards.
Is that pulpwood? No?
Nope.
And
It's not
that's
pulp.
So just
house
It's just, can we just call it wood?
lumber.
Well, so Evan Meenan from Natural Resources Board. So if the company that you're talking about receives wood from the forest and turns it into clapboards, it's covered by this definition already. But by including clapboard as an example of a forest product, then you would be including a business that receives the actual clapboards from the business you're talking about, primes them, and resells them. Then that second business would also be included as a forest-based enterprise. The idea is let's just address the businesses that are getting the logs and turning them into something. So if they're getting the logs and turning them into clapboards, they're included.
Okay, it wasn't defined as a forest product here.
That's
Right, 'cause-
Making boards.
Right,
Cool.
because it's used in the definition of forest-based enterprise up on line 6.
Right, so if they're using logs and adding value by processing it into a clapboard, they are a forest-based enterprise.
Okay.
Because the forest product talks about what's coming out of the woods, not what you're turning it into.
That's not necessarily the case in the definition. The definition looks like some of it's processed.
So they work together.
Okay.
Keep going for a little longer.
Okay, so the next section is new. It's adding section 6007 to your bill. So we talked about this on Friday. This is the jurisdictional opinion section, and so what you talked about on Friday was changing the entity that issues the jurisdictional opinion from the district coordinator to the district commission. So this is new language. Do you want me to read through it?
No.
yes.
Okay. With respect to the partition or division of land, or with respect to an activity which might or might not constitute development, any person may submit to the district commission an Act 250 disclosure statement or other information required by the rules of the board, and may request a jurisdictional opinion from the district commission concerning the applicability of this chapter. If a requester wishes a final determination to be rendered on the question, the district coordinator, at the expense of the requester, and in addition to with the rules of the board, shall publish notice of the issuance of the opinion in the local newspaper generally circulating in the area where the land that is subject of the opinion is located, and shall serve the opinion on all persons listed in subdivisions 6085C 1A through D of this title. In addition, the requester who is seeking a final determination shall consult with the district coordinator and obtain approval of a subdivision 6085C1E list of persons who shall be notified by the district coordinator because they are adjoining property owners or other persons who would likely be able to demonstrate a particularized interest protected by the chapter that may be affected by an act or decision by a district commission. So it does leave in place a duty for the district commissioner, which is to be the person who, the district coordinator, to be the one who's providing notice, and that's a policy decision about if you want it to be.
No, they need to do it, they're staffing.
Okay.
Yep. Well, Evan just left, and he was hoping he would provide some guidance.
Yeah, I just asked him about this, if you're concerned about this, but if I may?
Sure.
John Brabant. So if there's something going on that, you know, for all intents and purposes would fall under Act 50 jurisdiction, does this language mean you'd have to convene a quorum of a commission? So if there's something, an act going on right now, a clearing job, for instance, that requires immediate action, you'd have to convene a commission and see a quorum before they can issue a JO. Right now, I can send an email to a district coordinator. They can look at the facts set, and they can issue a JO immediately. That can be challenged, of course, but it allows for more immediate action. I don't know, the commission's going to meet semi-weekly, monthly.
Okay, so this is one of
Doesn't
the-
allow for a good response.
We're having the NRB in to ask them a couple of procedural questions, and this is one of those. And so, thank you for your testimony on that. We will follow up and ask questions about it.
Okay.
The ramifications of it. This is all in the conversation of how to, do the board adjustments and deal with district commissions. So it's in the larger piece of this, that change was requested.
Alright, so the next section gets into the board. Do you want me to walk through it? The text of the board has not changed because we're still discussing.
Yeah. So, I made a little graphic to share with the committee on the different options that we're talking about, summarizes them, and maybe we should start with this, maybe tomorrow afternoon, I don't know, but tomorrow.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, so we'll adjourn for today. Thank you, Ellen.